Hello, good afternoon. My name is Renee Moelders. I'm a partner with Convergence Coaching, and welcome to our Monday afternoon HR Huddle. I'm here with Samantha Mansfield, a senior consultant on our team. And Samantha, I was thinking about this. I was walking the dogs before we got started, so hopefully they'll be quiet. And I was thinking about how this is the last HR Huddle of May because
Oh my
next
gosh.
week
Yeah.
is Memorial Day, and then we're into June, which is wild. And
Yeah.
so Samantha and I are excited to be here. We're pinch hitting today for Tamara and Jen. Jen is on vacation this week, and then Tamara's traveling to a client. And so Samantha and I thought it would be good to talk today about tricky feedback. And, it's feedback season. It's performance review season. It's time for firms to probably make some decisions on some folks, like, are they working out or are they not? And so sometimes that involves having to give some difficult or tricky feedback and say some things that are uncomfortable or address behavioral issues that it's not any fun to give that feedback, but it is our job as leaders and managers to deal with it. And so Samantha and I are going to play around with this topic today and kind of delve into that. And Sam, I've been talking to coachees last week and this week, and people are like renewing their commitment to feedback. They're saying, I know I want to give feedback. I know I want to do better there. I fell off the wagon during busy season. And so I want to get back on, Renee. How can I do it? And so I don't know what you're hearing about feedback as we're setting up here.
No, I completely agree. And a couple of things I'm hearing too is one, because we're getting close to not getting close. We are kicking off some new programs where people are receiving 360-degree feedback and so forth. And as nerve-wracking as that is, they time and again I'm hearing they're so grateful because they don't get feedback to that level. And they're really looking forward to getting some real in-depth and specific feedback. So that's one piece. And then because we also are coaching a lot of leaders, one of the other things that I would say as we're thinking about tricky feedback, sometimes we think about how hard that is to give upward feedback, but yet our leaders, they want feedback too. It's not as though once you start moving up in leadership that you don't crave being able to get feedback and acknowledgement as well. And so I would say those are two big things that I'm hearing that support our message today.
Yeah, and Samantha, we have to give tricky feedback with our coachees because you talked about how they get this feedback at the beginning of the program. It's 360 feedback that we collect for them and we compile into a report. And universally, they have never gotten feedback that is that specific, that direct. And it's a wonderful job that we have, and also sometimes it can be a difficult job because we're kind of the ones who are coming in with the very straight messaging.
Right.
Also, universally, people are so grateful for that feedback because they hear things that they need to address or do better at. And so it's like, it's a terrible job in a way. And then it's also a job I'm so incredibly grateful for. And right now I'm doing completion calls with people because we're completing a program next week. They're going to graduate. And so with two people today, I said, they show me their presentation and they tell me what's next for them. And I'm like, yes. And, you need to do this too. Here's where you really need to stretch and grow yourself. And that's tricky too. It's like, it's not really what they want to hear. They want to talk about the easier things instead of the hard things. And so that's the job of a coach or a career manager or a performance manager. And so this is a skill we think people should get better at. And it's not that hard. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I wonder if you want to take people through the first methodology, which for tricky feedback, which is expectation, observation, inquiry, like set them up for the methodology. And then maybe we queue up an example and we talk about it.
Sure. So, a common method that we do discuss when it comes to giving some very specific feedback, especially when it is maybe something where we would say we have to be tough or straight talking. Those are some terms that people will think when they have to do it, but then we don't want to do it. And so there is a process that we do take people through. And that is one, we start with the expectation. So we need to ensure one, what was the expectation established? And we have to legitimately ask ourselves, let's be 100% responsible in this feedback. Were the expectations clearly established? So that's one piece that we need to identify. Then we would go into what's called the observation. So, what was behavior that ended up taking place? What did we observe happening? The key step that we would say here is be very careful in the telling or the relaying of the observation to make sure that we're keeping it factual. Really edit yourself in not putting the embellishments of adjectives in there, because all that does is when we get to the point of saying this to the person, that's where they can start to argue the adjectives, the superlatives that are in there. And that's not what we want. We're trying to really get to the very specific issue. So make sure that you're keeping it just about the facts and really take out the adjectives. And then what you want to do is you want to establish a question. So you share the expectation, but then what was observed. And now we want to ask him a question to dig into what happened, what created the discrepancy between the expectation and the observation. And when you're creating that, again, we want to create a question, not a close ended, not a yes or no. We want this to be something that gives them an opportunity to reflect and think about the answer. So, in that, when you ask the question, then what we want to make sure we do is stop and realize that that person is going to need at least a few seconds to go ahead and think about their answer. And very commonly, because we knew what we were bringing up, we're probably feeling anxious about it. And so that silence and that stopping is feeling exaggerated because we want to very often we want to jump in there. We want to start offering them answers or choices. But the whole point of this EOIS, expectation, observation, inquiry, and stop, is to give them the opportunity to really reflect on what you've asked and for them to start answering. And then, depending on how that goes, then we go into the next steps. But it gets the conversation started.
Yes, perfect, Samantha. And just to like bring it even more simply, if I were giving some feedback to my dogs who are being crazy, I would say, hey, I expected that we were going to be quiet during the HR huddle, and we had talked about that, but I'm observing that you're running around and fighting with each other and being crazy. What caused that? And that's silly because I'm just talking about my dogs, but I mean, it's as simple as that. We're trying to, and that's what Samantha took us through, is like distilling it down, making a very simple statement and laying it out for the person, and then being quiet and letting them speak, because I don't know why they did it. I don't understand. That's the whole purpose of the exercise, is to get in there and hear from them. If they're going to change, if they're going to improve, they're going to have to speak up. And one of the big issues, Samantha, we know firms are facing right now is that their people, they say, aren't working enough hours. We don't like that. We wish firms would focus more on effort or production or deliverables that they need to get across the finish line. So maybe we do it in terms of that. It's like, hey, look, I had expected that together we were going to produce X number of, audits together or pieces of the audit. And what I'm observing is that I feel like you're not hitting your timelines. What's going on there, or what happened, or why do you think that is? Mm-hmm. And then being quiet and hearing from that person. And I don't really know what they're going to talk about. They may have personal challenges that they raise. They may come up with something from a business perspective. They may tell you, I'm distracted, I'm having a hard time focusing, I'm having mental wellness issues. I don't know what's going to come out, but I sure do want to create enough space so that that person will get in there and talk to me. And the trickiest feedback, I think, with EOIS is behavioral. And that is like, hey, we're a team here in our audit department, and that's something we talk about a lot. But what I'm observing is that I feel like other people are having to pick up the pieces for you, which doesn't feel like you're operating in a team. over here, it doesn't feel like teamwork. And so, what's going on there? Or what do you think is causing that? And then be quiet and, have that person then weigh in. And they might get upset and they might cry. We might have to pull out the tissue box, or they might get mad. And, so strategies for that, Samantha, what do you think? If things get really emotional, how do you handle that?
Well, I think one of the things is the same thing is some of the prep work before you go into the conversation. And so, where you were just saying, Renee, we don't know what the answer is going to be, but one of the elements we would say when you're going into this conversation is that you need to get unhooked from the emotions. You need to go ahead and diffuse your frustration, maybe irritation, impatience, whatever that might be, right? We let us get diffused before we go in, because then when that person starts to respond, and maybe it's in one of those emotional ways you just said, Renee, now we've got emotion feeding emotion, and it can amplify. Whereas if we're going into it in a calmer state where I can address it from a more neutral place, then I have a better chance of being able to stay calm and be able to address the person. And so the technique that we talk about for being able to unhook ourselves and diffuse is we play the interpretation game. And with that, what you want to start with is the example. So, Renee, I'm going to play off of your dogs there, but your dogs being, they're not trained, they're bad dogs, they're a bad temperament. Those are all negative, ugly interpretations. And unfortunately, most of us are really good at going right there. Whereas now we need to flip ourselves and say, what's the positive interpretation? The positive or the hopeful could be that maybe the dogs have been cooped up in their kennels all day, and the 15-minute walk just wasn't enough to burn their energy off to calm them down. Or maybe they have to go to the bathroom. That didn't happen, and they're trying to tell you, right? So these are those hopeful interpretations where, hey, I can influence some of this, but I need to know what's going on, right? And again, silly example with the dogs, but I think it's easily translatable to so many different scenarios like the audit or whatnot. So instead of going in with your emotions high, let's pull them back, play that interpretation game, get neutral, and then realize that person needs time to be able to process their emotions as well. Let's
Yes,
not
I
let's
love it,
not
Samantha.
overreact.
Yes, totally. Well, and the other thing I was thinking of, I have a placard on my wall and it says, "Love the unlovable."
Mhm.
And so, really going in there with care and concern and understanding, you can't really go in with care and concern if you're mad or if you're irritated. It's going to be tough. And
It's hard
so,
to have empathy.
yeah, that's right. So, figuring out how you can set some of that aside to really go in there and try to make that person better, because ultimately that's our goal.
Mhm.
Either make them better or give them the chance to get better,
Mhm.
or and then be confident enough to make the decision, if not, to exit them. And I think that's what we see with firms who aren't giving feedback, who aren't talking straight to their people, is that every time when it comes time to decide to fire someone or not, it's hard for us because we know we haven't really done what we needed to do with that person. And so we say, oh, well, we'll keep them around. Maybe just, we'll keep them this summer and see how they do. But if nobody gets in there and is straight with them about what's not working, we're not going to resolve our problems.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Samantha, so I think we need to talk about the ultimate, tricky feedback, which is side stream feedback to a peer, or upstream feedback, which is to a
Right.
partner or someone above us. And so we have two methodologies for that. You want to pick one of those and talk about it?
Sure. I think probably I'll do one that I think I probably use a lot and have for many years, and that's information sharing. because it comes from a less threatening space. So, information sharing is where we can say, based on a class I was just in, or a webinar that I went, or an article I read, whatever, wherever you would get the information and say, I was reading this and I thought, maybe we could talk about this, or I thought that it was applicable to our team or to our firm, and I wanted to discuss this with you. And that's a very disarming way to be able to bring it up, because especially when it's a peer or it's up, you're giving that feedback upward. It's we're pulling it not just from my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own impressions, but truly other people are out there talking about these things, and it seems like something we should be talking about too.
Yes, and I was just going through this with a coachee earlier today because she has some frustrations with her partner group around how they're handling mentoring and people development. And so we were talking about maybe getting some articles, talking to other firms, people in her TLP class who are doing a better job with this, and then coming back with, this is best practice, or these firms have tried this and here are the benefits that they've had. And so that's exactly where you're coming from with information sharing. It's like, it's not just my opinions or my ideas,
Right.
but it's proven results. I mean, that's the whole reason when you look at like, commercials or advertising and they say like proven results, you're not the first person who's used this product. That's the whole thing, is like quelling those concerns about, I don't want to be the first person to try this, or why would we do this here? Well, because other people are doing it and they're getting good results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a great methodology, and you can use articles that we publish or other experts in the industry publish, or I'm sure you see articles sometimes on Forbes, around management that you say, we should be doing that at our firm. And that's a great, like grab that article, share it with others. I learned about this and I think this is something we should be doing. So it's very non-threatening and a way to sort of shift and change people's perceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous tool to use. The other one we like, or did you want to say something else before?
I was going to add something with where we are in the time of year, and given that this is devoted to our HR professionals, really taking a look at things even outside the profession, like Josh Burson's 2023 HR predictions, looking at some things on Shroom, because that's where we can really get great innovation, is when we start looking at what other industries and what else is happening. And then you can be the leader in maybe finding some new resolution instead of what every other firm is trying to.
Totally, Samantha. And actually, coming up here in 2 weeks, there's the Engage conference, which this year is co-locating with the CPA FMA conference.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another thing, is like going to these webinars through CPA FMA or going to their conference every June and coming back with ideas, best practices. Yes, totally. And you have to figure out, we've talked about this before in a previous HR Huddle, which maybe Caroline could kind of dig around and figure out where, but where do you find those trends? What should you be plugged into? We probably have a huddle that people can go back and listen to figure that out. Mm-hmm. So the other methodology is palms up. And that one is very, very vulnerable. It requires some vulnerability from the user of the method. And that is like, hey, I need your help. Like, and I have a coachee from a program a couple of years ago who used this in his tax department. He was really concerned. He and his fellow managers were concerned about how they were people managing in their office and the impact that it was having on the staff. And they just could not bear the thought that they were going to have a bunch of people turn over. And so they went to their partners and said, like, hey, listen, we need to ask your help. We want to make a change here. And as a group, we've been discussing it. And this is what we're picturing. And here's why we're worried about it. And so how can you help us with this? And the partners said, hey, yeah, go for it. Try it. Like, because the whole idea was the managers wanted to pull that people management away from the partners and have managers very hands-on with the seniors and staff. And they were all worried that the partners were going to be upset. And basically they said, yes, let's try it. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be a very compelling method if, if your people find themselves in a corner or upset or need some help. It can be a great methodology, HR leaders, for you to teach to your team or for you to go employ. If you're worried about a particular staff who's working for someone and it's not going well, go in there, HR professional, saying, hey, listen, I need your help, manager. I'm worried we're going to lose this staff if we don't make some changes to their schedule or the jobs that they're being placed on. So it can be a very compelling way to get other people to come over in your direction.
And I agreed. There's so many successes that have come from this. And one to keep in mind is that this isn't a plea for you go fix it, right? This isn't like hot potato. That's not palms up where I can't figure it out. You go figure it out. That's not what we're saying with this, but it really is. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I've tried. I could use your help. How do we find a resolution? And it's great with a peer as well, because a peer may not want to feel that they're being told, but that they want to collaborate on a solution with you. And it's a great strategy to use with a peer and say, hey, co-manager of tax department, I'm worried about how the team is feeling here at the end of the season. I have some thoughts on what we could do to make sure we're engaging them, but I want to work with you. What are your thoughts? What do you think we could be doing? So it's a really great, as you said earlier, side stream or peer type of feedback technique as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Samantha, tricky feedback, we just have a few more minutes here, but some of the really tricky things that come across the desk of a manager or a partner or an HR professional are like body odor, dress, like someone were questioning, are they showering on a regular basis? Like some of these kinds of things. Sure. And so any words of wisdom or thoughts about those trickiest feedback that we have to give?
Yeah, it is true. I think part of it is that we have to be straight, right? I think one of the key pieces that I hear is that we kind of dance around giving the feedback. So whether it's an expectation of what professional presentation looks like in the office, or what we're expecting, starting there, and then getting into there's some observation of something happening, right? So whether it's the body odor or it's a dress issue or something along those lines, and then giving them a chance to respond. But I think the key is that we have to be specific in what we're saying, because too often we get embarrassed and try to dance around it, and then the person doesn't get the real feedback.
Right.
And then in your mind or in the leadership's mind that the item has been addressed, but in actuality, in the person's mind, they really didn't understand what was being said. And that's not fair to anybody for a next step.
Well, and what I don't like is when firms just send out the policy manual to everyone when there's one person that's not adhering to the policy. For instance, with the dress policy, you don't solve your problem that way. So yes, you're right. We do have to be straight. And we have a piece of our feedback methodology as you kind of expand it. And so let's say you go through expectation, observation, inquiry, stop. And then you're following up with some continuing to help them understand. One of the things that you can do is talk about your commitment. Mm-hmm. And you can say, hey, listen, I'm really committed to your success here and your development. Right. And I want you to be presented in the very best light. And what I'm concerned about is I'm noticing some, where I'm not sure you're being presented in the base light based on your dress or, based on your smell, I'm concerned about that. And so, and that definitely, it's a nuanced conversation, probably something that you want to talk to HR about. HR professionals, you want to tell your people, if you're going in to give tricky feedback, reach out to me. I will help you with that. And we have some tools and resources that we can share. We'll put a couple of things in the chat, and people certainly can reach out to us and talk to us about that, ask us about it, because we don't want you to sweep those things under the rug. It's crazy to have a really wonderfully technical person or a wonderfully people-focused person who's being held back because they're not dressing in the right way, because people feel like, well, it's too embarrassing to take them out to a client or to a prospect. And so it's the very biggest gift that we can give that person to really help them address what's not working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it could be, maybe it's not the simplest answer, but there could be a solution that we can get to. And it's really about collaborating on finding what that is.
Well, and oftentimes they just don't know about it. They aren't aware. And we can say, well, they should know, they should be aware, but I don't think they would be. These are people who want to be successful. They just haven't figured it out yet.
Exactly.
Yes. So I wish we had more time, because I'd like to delve more into the examples, but I know we're at 26 minutes, so we probably should close out here. So please do reach out to us if you need additional resources. If you have a particularly tricky feedback situation that you would like to run by us, you can email us. You can hit us out there on social media, on LinkedIn. Please do connect with us and stay in touch with our HR Huddle. We won't be publishing a huddle, I believe, next week, but we will be back online the week afterwards, the first week of June. So thank you very much, everyone, for being with us. Thank you, Samantha, for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.
Enjoy the start of summer.